Hey, Power People. Welcome to Renewable Rides, powered by VECKTA. I'm Gareth Evans, the CEO and founder.
And I'm Dan Roberts, head of sales. In each episode, we'll uncover the latest trends, learnings, challenges, and triumphs relating to the energy transition, on-site energy, and sustainability through the experiences of our inspiring guests and team here at VECKTA.
So get ready for an exhilarating adventure into the fast-paced world of challenging limits, adapting purposefully, and empowering co-creation to accelerate the energy transition with those that are on a mission to create a more resilient, profitable, sustainable, and thriving energy future. So let's go. All right, welcome everyone back to another episode of Renewable Rides. And Dan and I are honored to be joined by Andy Klump today from Clean Energy Associates. Andy is a legend in the renewable energy arena, and in terms of a renewable ride, you've had a wild ride, I think, Andy, and we're excited to dig into that today.
Absolutely. No, it's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and your audience. So love the work your team is doing, so happy to jump into it.
Cool. Well, we always start, Andy, with understanding what people are passionate about, because that allows us to learn a huge amount about you. So personally, professionally, what is it that you're super passionate about?
I am extremely passionate about just the chance to build culture and bring new talent into our industry. My background in solar, I guess, dates back to 2006. But I am thoroughly a big fan of bringing folks in the industry, because back in those days, there was no one who had solar experience, and I had no budget when I was first took the job at Trina Solar. So I had to pretty much cajole anyone who had some interest in the sector to come on board. And it's great to see some of my ex-team members now running different divisions or companies on their own. And so it's very exciting to see how the sector's grown in 17 years. But we absolutely have to keep bringing new talent on board. And that's one of the challenges we have at Clean Energy Associates, is always finding talent. So that's why I'm always eager to spread the message about our culture and how exciting and dynamic we are. But I think the industry in general needs to continue to bring in bright minds to continue to grow and expand.
That's brilliant. So that's an awesome segue. Do you want to tell us about your current role today, what CEA is, and then what differentiates your culture in terms of the impact you're making?
Absolutely. So once again, Clean Energy Associates is a technical advisor. We provide support to our clients and our client stakeholders in over 78 countries today.
Wow.
We provide help and support in areas of upstream supply chain management, which is effectively our procurement advisory practice. We also provide support in the factories, completing quality assurance engagements where teams are actually monitoring the product as it's being manufactured. We also have an engineering services team that's located in different markets, providing downstream engineering support directly at the system level. And then finally, we have a market intelligence team, which is aggregating all of the project data that we have, all the defects we see in the factories and the field, and really helping our clients to make decisions as they expand. Once again, Clean Energy Associates has a 15-year track record with over 250 gigawatts of projects that our clients have completed in over 30 gigawatt hours of energy storage. So solar is always our bread and butter from day one, but we expanded energy storage about 10 years ago, and we're seeing that sector ramp quite nicely. And once again, I founded the company 15 years ago and ran and operated this as a sole man band, so to speak. But last year, Intertech acquired the business, and so now I'm still running the business as a standalone CEO and a standalone P&L within a broader organization of 44,000 folks. And once again, Intertech has 1,000 test labs in 100 countries across many different segments. So we're effectively the renewable energy technical advisory arm now within Intertech.
That's incredible. How did you end up getting to this spot? I imagine it hasn't been a straightforward journey. And as the podcast is titled Renewable Rides, we'd love to hear more about this ride that you've been on, and where did it start? Where did you grow up? What motivated you to get into this?
Sure. So a lot of questions answered there, but I'll say right now I'm talking to you from Bangkok, Thailand, and I just moved here with my family. My wife and four daughters are all integrated in life here in Thailand. But prior to that, the previous 19 years, I was living and working in China. But once again, at the very origin story, which is what you just asked, I've actually been, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. I spent 18 years in the same house. My dad was a taxi cab driver for 44 years, and my mom was a school teacher. But we had a very basic, simple Midwest, humble upbringing. And I was really just the second kid out of two, and had an older sister. And I think my real origin story related to renewables happened when I was, I guess 5 years old. My mom said, hey, let's do something that's good for the planet. And so we started to pick up aluminum cans off the side of the street and in the park. And so that was part of my kind of side hobby. And then I realized, wow, we can take these cans and bring them to the recycling center. And so I remember at the age of 5, bringing in a big giant garbage can of aluminum cans and earning $2.54. And I was thrilled. It was more money than I'd ever seen, because I was basically, drying dishes for a nickel, and then doing odd chores around the house. So it was that was big money back then. But I said, wow, it'd be pretty neat if I could actually help the planet and also get paid for it. So that was always in the back of my mind. But fast forward to growing up in St. Louis, getting into Boy Scouts, going out. We never had any vacation, so my 1 week of scout camp each summer was the highlight of my time. So I just really had a natural affinity towards the outdoors, and said, hey, if I can protect the planet and help build my career in that direction, that'd be great. But I did work for a few years in the software sector in the United States, and then it was during business school I kind of made a transition. I first traveled to Asia. I never really traveled outside of the Missouri, Illinois, Kansas barrier until I was 15 years old. So I really didn't see much of the U.S., let alone the world. But I had an interest in seeing the world, partially due to the fact my dad had a National Geographic subscription. And so I was always flipping through magazines and seeing different parts of the world. And I really had no interest in China whatsoever until I had a friend who traveled in Southeast Asia, and he told me I should go. And so right before business school in 2001, that's when I took a trip to Southeast Asia and just became fascinated with the different cultures in Asia. And I said, I did not go to China on that trip, but I planned a trip several months later to go to China with a business school group. And that's where I fell in love with China. I started studying the language, and I just said, that is absolutely my passion, is to go to China. I just was just awe-inspired by the hundreds of millions of folks coming out of abject poverty over the course of several decades and building up a sustainable middle-class culture. And so I was just inspired by what I saw in China and said, let me try to build a career there. So fast forward a few years beyond that, I studied intensely in school. I studied on my own. I tried to pick up Mandarin, and after living there for a couple of years, managed to gain some level of business fluency. But I had interacted with one of the investors at Trina Solar, and she was a board member and invited me to go visit the company and interview for a position. So I took a role directly as the vice president of business development for Mr. Jifan Gao, who's the founder and CEO of Trina Solar, and has been for the last 25 years. So I had the great pleasure to work for Mr. Gao for 2+ years. And, I guess just to fill out the personal story, I'd also met a wonderful woman who later became my wife, kind of leading up to my time at Trina. And so the smartest thing I did was propose to her right before I started Trina, because she pretty much didn't see me for 2 years. But after we got married, I promised her, hey, things are going to get better. We just listed the company on the New York Stock Exchange, and things become more calm. But it was just a constant race, and it never became calm. So I said, I want to stay married to my wife and not to Trina Solar. But the company did grow about 10x in those 2 years, from 500 to 5,000. And to go through all the rigors of a public listing, to be on earnings calls on a quarterly basis, I learned a lot about the sector. but also about myself and my fortitude. And I said, all right, now's the time to stay in China because my wife and I loved it, but set up my own shingle. And so that's when I founded CEA 15 years ago.
So
long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully I covered all those items.
I love that. I love that. One of the things that I particularly liked about it is that you wanted to calm things down. So you went and started your own business. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the genesis of CEA and I mean, it's been about 16 years or 15 years. Like, tell us the journey that you've been on with CEA.
Well, I remember distinctly, yes, wanting to have control over my schedule, but I realized that while I did not have a direct company that was controlling my schedule, I had instead many companies that control my schedule. So my companies were my clients, and so I had to learn to be responsive to them, but I could at least do that on my own terms. So one of my challenges at Trina that I always struggle with is, I'd been traveling internationally intensely, sometimes being away for 2 or 3 weeks out of China at a time. And then I'd finally come back and have some urgent meeting in the headquarters. And it'd be a Friday evening. I was eager to go see my wife, go jump on the train. And Mr. Guy would say, oh, wait, where are you going, Andy? We have an offsite management team meeting that's going to require you to stay this weekend. And I said, I didn't hear about this, and it wasn't in the calendar. He said, we just decided a few minutes ago. So why don't you just plan on going? So okay, well, that's my 1 day and a half of freedom, because I had to be back by Sunday evening since I was 2.5 hours away. So it was just a lot of kind of things like that just said, look, that's not the right way to treat your executive team. And so when I set up CA, I said, look, we are a global company. It is just myself and an intern, but we are going to respect everyone's schedule and be as accommodating as possible. And so I really set up CA with the intention to help clients solve problems. I said, look, there are plenty of market research firms and others in the sector, but I said, I just want to help solve whatever challenges make the most sense. And I stepped out in 2008 during the global financial crisis. I literally I took 1 week of break between my time at Trina and the time that I was setting up CA. And I was literally in a boat in the Pacific Ocean, didn't have connected to anything. And I didn't know about the global financial crisis. So when I came back, it was kind of a shock to say, oh, all those grandiose plans, the sector was hot, things were going great in Spain and elsewhere in Europe. But then everything got turned upside down. So I had to realize I had to pivot to survival. And so the real renewable ride that, is, as some people call the solar coaster, it really was just starting in 2008. But it was really some people say it was the worst of times. I say it was the best of times to start a company in a downturn, because I had no overhead. I just had myself. We had no kids. I was working on my apartment. So when you basically have very low costs, then you can't go much. You just have to barely get by. So I remember my first engagement was with an Indian company. I got paid like $1,500 for like a boatload of work, and I was probably the equivalent of working McDonald's for minimum wage back then. But I was thrilled to get that money because that paid for part of my rent, and that was I was just trying to aim for. But look, over time, slowly built things up. Hired more than one intern, 2 interns. And then we had, I remember there was a point where my wife, it was 2010, we've been working at home for some time, and there were actually like 3 interns waiting to use the bathroom. My wife came down, was pregnant in her house in her overcoat. And she just said, I don't know who these people are, but I need all of you out today. We're going to have a baby in like 2 weeks, and Andy, you need to get your act together. So that was the point where I said, okay, I've got to really grow up, and I've got to take on rent and start investing in a proper business environment and create things a little more professionally. So from there, we started to hire analysts rather than just interns, and slowly build things out. But it definitely took a few years before I kind of found the right footing, and the company grew and scaled. But we had it was a great ride, and But I will say the reason I'm so passionate about culture, and that was the first question you had asked, is because I was my worst enemy at the first few years of Trina. And I didn't, or I'm sorry, at probably Trina as well, but at CEA, I didn't realize the importance of setting a clear strategic direction and creating the right framework by which we could grow and scale. So once I went through some deeper soul searching, I started working with an executive coach, and she actually worked with me on my personal issues and overcoming some of my probably lack of sophistication as a CEO. I then worked with another executive coach who was a systems and process coach, and he really walked us through how do we create culture, how do we create a set of values. And it wasn't my values, it was 16 of us that got together in a room in 2016, 15 and 16, and really vetted out what are the elements of the CEA DNA. And at that point, we created values that we're still using today. And so from that base, roughly 8 years ago, the company was roughly at 30, 35 or so. We've now grown to close to 240, and it's exciting to see the rapid growth of both the sector as well as our business. But the need in the market is very strong for what we do, and we have to have a high caliber team which is aligned on culture. So that's why I care very much about that topic.
How do you maintain that culture as you scale? What's the secret sauce for you?
So one of them is really living the values on a daily basis. And to back up a second, I will say that 2015 exercise I went through with the executive coach wasn't the first time we tried it. And in 2011, I remember we were 8 or 10 folks, and I had an intern, Wong Yi, who went off to do amazing things for us and then in the industry. And she said, Andy, what are your core values and what's your vision and direction? I said, that's a great question. Let's call that an intern project, and let's get the team together and decide what those are. And so we went through an exercise, and she just kind of Googled, well, how do you define core values? And we went through, and he talked about sustainability and passion and integrity. But those were just kind of words on a page. And so we did that exercise for 2 hours. We agreed on our 5 core values, and then they just sat and collected dust. So it was a worthless exercise because we didn't live those core values. But once we went through with a proper executive coach, defining our core values, defining our core purpose, we then reinforce those on a daily basis. And so we have a lot of different mechanisms where we give out awards on a monthly basis. We have a weekly Good News Friday announcement that we have. We have a culture book, which is an amalgamation of all these different culture tools. And I put that on our website. And look, I mean, our competitors could listen, you could read that book. They could listen to any of my podcasts talking about what we do in culture. But it's not any one thing. It's like 1,000 different things that we do together, which in aggregate makes a huge, huge impact. And we are continuing to innovate. I was just reading this book, Never Lose an Employee Again. This is a book that myself and all our executives just read, and we talk about it with our executive coach on a monthly basis. We discuss strategy, and we work with our team to say, how do we implement some of these great ideas? One tool that we just deployed that came from one of our executives, Jake Eady, he deployed this tool called Motivasi, and I was all on board to get this thing going. So we just launched it. But it effectively is a team member recognition tool. I don't like to use the E word. We use team members or professionals for all of our teams. But the great thing about Motivasi is it's not just a top-down initiative. We'd always ask people on a monthly award, okay, who deserves this, and get different ideas, bubble up, and then make a decision, send it down. Now anyone can give recognition to someone else. So we actually give money for everyone to decide, who do you want to give money to this month? And they just can allocate, we call them wub drop bucks to our team, and they can use that to buy things when they collect enough. So wub drop is the core acronym of our core values. We are family, have fun, unending curiosity, be humble, do the right thing, results matter, own it, and perform above and beyond. So if you're not living those values on a daily basis, then it doesn't matter. And so it's not about talking the talk, it's about walking the walk, and then celebrating the stories of the team members who are living those values. So those are a number of different ways that we really try to reinforce culture. But boy, I wish, Gareth, I was at your level where we just had a smaller group of folks. It's very easy to drive culture in a small group, but when you have folks in 15 countries, 240 and spread out in many different languages and cultures, the culture can transcend, but it takes years and years to build that up. Yes. So it was not an easy transition in 2015 when we changed this direction. It took us the better part of 2 years. But once we did that, boy, we just went through massive growth for several years pre-COVID. And it was super exciting to see and witness how the culture really took a life of its own.
Everything you just shared really resonates, because I've been a part of organizations that just some words on a wall or words on a page, but I will say kudos to Gareth for putting together some pretty amazing core values that we live by as an organization, and similarly recognize people. But curious, as you've gone through your growth, how has culture played into attracting people, as well as in the interview process, determining, is this person someone that can exhibit these values and fit within our culture and grow our culture? What does that look like? Especially, I imagine even pre-COVID, you're such a distributed team all over the world. Doing Zoom meetings was not something new probably when COVID hit. So how does that work as you're recruiting people from different countries, different cultures?
Absolutely, and I will comment. We always had a work from home culture or a work remote culture much earlier than COVID, and part of it came out of the fact that I was in China, and while I built a small core team that was in Shanghai, we also had folks in factories. They were being asked to go in different parts of the world, and we had the tariff case, and so folks had to go to Southeast Asia. We had to build a team there, and we then started hiring in the U.S. Back 10 years ago in 2013, and that was another transition. But look, I just said, hey, I care about hiring the best talent for the budget that we have to meet the needs of our clients, and that's what we did. And so we didn't have a concentration of folks in one area, even though we put Denver as a site for our office. We never had a full-fledged team there working in an office on a daily basis. So to absolutely your point on recruiting, culture is absolutely huge. And that's why we put the culture book out. The culture book that CA has on our website right now is the third year of doing the culture book. We have a standard operating procedure about how we go and collect all the data and the positive news we've had in the company throughout the year, and we put that in the culture book. I went to Las Vegas during one of the trade shows back when the SPI, the RE Plus was called SPI, and I went to Zappos and I read the Tony Hsieh book on delivering happiness. I was amazed at that. They said, "You're going to come for a tour." I said, I signed up, and I just learned so much about culture building there. And I said, at the end of the tour, they give you the book for free. And I said, wow, this is exactly what I want. I want to build our own culture book. And so it took us a few years until we actually pulled it off. But now it's, started off at 40, 50 pages. Now it's, 80, 90 pages, and we're working on, and it takes multi-months to put this together. I spend a lot of time on it, but I've got a great team that follows our SOP to execute this. And that becomes a great recruiting tool, because I can just say, look, our culture book's on our website, so go take a look. I mean, this is not something I whipped together in a weekend. This is a pretty massive effort. But look, I talk about culture on these type of podcasts, and I say to folks, listen to a podcast so you understand CEA, because we're totally open book, and we're not perfect. Anyone can go out and look at public websites that have different news, and not everyone likes our culture because it's also intense at times, and we have folks in different countries, and so we can't hire someone on a 9-to-5 basis and expect them to run a global business unit. That just doesn't happen. But we do try to respect family time. I do the same thing myself. I take a break from 6 to 8 when I've got to help make sure the kids eat and read books and get to bed. But then I jump on calls because I'm constantly talking to clients in different countries or team members elsewhere. And so not everyone has that same job as I do, but depending on what you're doing, it's going to require to sometimes burn the candle at both ends. So it's not easy for everyone. And that's why we're always trying to think about what are ways that we can build our culture and encourage the team to lead that culture. So that's why we have a winning culture team that has their own budget. They make decisions. They celebrate birthdays. They celebrate key highlights in the company in different ways. But I'm not a part of that. I support it. We created the foundation over many years, but folks who want to come to a company with core purpose and meaning, they come to CEA and they are thrilled by this, and they're thrilled by the culture book, and a lot of folks identify with our core purpose. We believe that by helping our clients and stakeholders deploy solar and storage solutions worldwide, we are creating a better future. And that is the core purpose we remind our team on a monthly basis. But one of the key jobs as a CEO is to continue to communicate culture and to over communicate the core themes about what we're doing. And so I will say we would not be nearly as successful if it's not the full engagement of our team. And that's why, once again, it requires a full-time job. So I'm only able to do it part of the time, but it's about reading books like this one that I just referenced, and building new ideas and trying things and failing on things, but accepting the failure as a learning opportunity and moving on.
Yeah, it's awesome. We're very aligned, and love to learn from you and make sure that we build a strong culture, because that's what this industry absolutely needs, is a group of people who are co-creating a more sustainable, thriving future. And you touched on the impact for you guys is deploying solar and storage. What is it that's exciting you about where the industry is heading right now, Andy? What's in terms of the energy transition? What's got you super stoked?
So I'm thrilled to see the recent policy support that has really driven the United States to build out additional manufacturing capacity. I think it's fantastic that having the IRA in full deployment. We have a manufacturing services team that we've grown and built out of the key DNA of CA, which is understanding what's going on in the factories. But we have an amazing group led by Mark Hegedorn, who is a standalone P&L running initiatives to help multiple clients set up US-based manufacturing for cells, modules, and also other parts of the value chain. But It's exciting to see the rebirth of manufacturing in the United States. If you compare solar to the automobile sector, we saw that similar trend back in the 80s when Japanese car companies started setting up manufacturing in the US. But look, I mean, solar is going to become such a massive industry. We have to have manufacturing hubs around the world. They can't just be in China. China is a world leader in terms of technology, scale, and deployment. But and the Chinese have brought a tremendous amount to this industry. So for me, it's exciting to be a part of that. But we're also taking a lot of our experience and exposure across all these different facilities and helping to see more deployments in the United States. So to me, that's very exciting. It's also exciting to see the scale of the industry. I mean, the industry has literally grown 300 plus X since I first joined. I remember 2006, the industry was at 1.6 gigawatts. We were just trying to push out 10 megawatts of product in a quarter. That was like a big deal. And, people shoot that out in just one line in half a day. So it's just amazing, like the scale of the industry right now. So it's going to continue to grow and deploy. But I was just hearing the statistics that I think California is up to like 10% penetration of the energy mix on solar. It's like mind-boggling. It was a fraction of a percent when I started out 17 years ago. But I mean, globally, we're still single digits, right? And we need to get to double-digit territory. But there's a lot of growth that's needed to get there. So I'm really thrilled to see that we're seeing support both in governments and in the industry. But the other piece that also really excites me is the supply chain. The supply chain has become so increasingly efficient. And if you study the transition of some of the form factors on modules, and it's all kind of based on a lot of durations of the wafer size, everything is now fully optimized. There's new kind of rectangular size wafers that are really getting the modules to, they literally, eliminating the empty space in containers. And so they're going to be stacked, perfectly to make sure you maximize the space. Now there's other balance of systems issues and other parts of the industry that need to adapt as these new form factors are being deployed in the markets. But it just totally makes sense. Just every inch of space and every brain cell in our sector is going towards how do we continue to optimize, increase efficiency, reduce cost, and take innovative ways of deploying solar and storage. So it's super exciting to see what's happening.
Love that. We've come a tremendously long way. Still a long way to go. What do you see as some of the challenges that we have and the industry needs to address, or that business leaders need to be thinking about as we look forward over the next years and decades?
This answer has probably come trite, and it's mentioned by many business leaders, but I have to say it again, which is people. And it is so true. And that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about culture at CEA, and also inviting new people to come to the industry. We do hire mostly industry experts, and we have a deep bench of folks at our executive level and throughout our whole organization that have background within the sector. But we're increasingly hiring folks who have other areas of expertise and building that into our system, because we have to have sustainable training and development of our team members to help them grow and expand and bring in best-in-class ideas. So we are in a shortage of talent in the entire industry. When you're growing at the speed that we are, it's just inevitable that we have to bring new folks on board. So I will definitely say people is the biggest obstacle to growth. And really, I love the fact that when we get folks from other different sectors, we bring them in because they also bring different ideas. And we're a culture that's very open to new ideas. We want to engage as many different bright minds to help solve challenges and problems. But by working closely with bright folks, they are trained to do many amazing things. And so I will say, I'm always sad whenever someone leaves CEA, because we spend a lot of time on culture building and developing folks. And I've had a number of folks who now have shifted to multiple divisions within CEA. We always try to have a different rotation of different roles and opportunities. But there also are now folks who've left CEA. They've seen other companies not have that same culture, and they've come back. Nice. And so we kind of created a mini team of this, the returnees, if you will. And we're always happy when someone comes back to the CEA family, because we are family is our first core value. And so I always tell everyone, the industry is very small. I understand you had to take this position for whatever reason. Could be personal, could be professional, but always like to maintain a dialogue and continue to build those connections. And that comes back in positive ways. So I very much was deeply involved. The first 150 folks in the company, I was involved in the interviewing process with every single one of them. And so I'm not able to get involved with all interviews these days, but I still enjoy connecting with new folks, and definitely hiring anyone at the senior level or strategic hires. I get involved, but it's really about how do we overcome this challenge of finding the right people in our sector.
Yeah, awesome.
Building on that, is there any advice that you have for people that are looking to break into the sector on things they should be doing, areas they can be educating themselves?
Oh, well, one of the things I always say very openly, and I've already referenced this before, is I said, listen to podcasts, do the homework, do the research. I have plenty of folks who come to me having listened to several of my podcasts, and they know about CEA's culture. They know I'm a type A personality and I'm not an easy interview, but they know and respect that I have a certain perspective, and I'm interested in getting to know what they can bring to the table. So I would say anyone who's interviewing for a job at CEA, listen to podcasts, but I would say anyone who's active and interested in the sector, look at the amount of materials that are out there. We also have a number of webinars that are recorded and put out on different websites. No problem whatsoever to put all those on board, or you can check YouTube, because we want folks to understand as much as they can about the industry. So do your homework. You'd be surprised how many people come ill-prepared for interviews, but our in-house recruiters are pretty good about telling our candidates, don't come unprepared to an interview with Andy, and they know. So it's It's a lot of fun, but it does require some work and prep. And once again, those who are dedicated to getting in our sector, they'll go through and do the homework because they realize they have a lot to learn. And I still have a lot to learn, and I've been in this sector for 17 years. So I'm constantly reminded the CA core value of be humble, because there's a truckload that I don't know. Once again, I am not an engineer by training. I was an economics major. I got an MBA. Those degrees did not help me that much to run an engineering company. So there's a fraction of what I know about supply chain, which comes in handy. Some of our clients like to talk to me about those supply chain topics. But there's I'd say 99% of what happens at CA, I am not in the details and not able to know. But my focus is on building the team and making sure we have professionals running each of those business units. They're able to help solve the needs of our clients. And if I can play some small sideshow Bob role, then I'm happy to do that. But it's really about the team helping to execute. So that's what excites me.
And I think a lot of people will be thinking, what was the catalyst moment for you deciding to sell a business? You obviously put in a huge amount of graft to build the business. Was there a particular point in time or a particular trigger for you that made it make sense?
I once again, I really, when I set up CA, I was just trying to get my salary back at Trina. I just first was to like pay my bills. And then I was like, okay, maybe I can eventually get a salary that I had at Trina. Then once I kind of surpassed that, I said, okay, well, I just love building and growing companies. And so I never, I didn't have a strategic plan to sell. And that's probably why it ended up taking us 14 years. But I just focused on building the right culture, the right client relationships. And I should apologize. I did not actually work on the culture part first. I already explained that story. So once I figured out that culture was the key to growth and the key to success, then I invested heavily in that. But once again, I always owned and operated the business. We never took outside capital. I was a pretty strong-willed, stubborn entrepreneur, as you can guess. So I just never saw that I needed to bring in outside equity investors. So I just said, I'd rather just grow it organically. And I kept all the cash in the business so we could weather a rainy day. And that's what I did. And I went through a couple of different cycles where there were downturns. And we did have months and quarters where we lost money. And I was really doing some soul searching, and I was working 20 hours a day to try to make up for that loss. But it was, I think it was kind of a realization as my daughters were getting older that I needed to spend a little less time on the road and a little more time with them. And I think particularly, COVID was a shell shock to the company. But we weathered the storm well. We were still profitable. We still work with our same clients. We had to pivot our marketing approach since we couldn't go to trade shows. But I think it was just a gradual realization that, look, at that point, we were in 13 countries. And I said, look, I see a lot of benefits to partnering with someone who is a global provider of services, and they can really plug in. We can plug in their platform much more effectively. I spent a lot of time in Chile in 2013 and 14 and setting up an entity and trying to build a business there. And I'm not saying it was a waste of time, but it was a lot of lost time. And so for that reason, we did a little bit of work in Chile, but it was a truckload of effort. And so we had similar decision points in various other markets like Brazil. And we just said, look, we're not going to go set up an entity because we made that mistake in Chile. So we held off, and it worked to our benefit. But guess what? Once we started working with Intertech and we plugged into their network of 100 plus countries, like immediately just business came internationally we would not have had access to. We won a 7-figure job in Brazil just because they had a team and an entity set up. We had the immediate 25% tax penalty that didn't exist. So our teams were still executing on this on a global basis, but we were able to help a Brazilian client than we would have been able to otherwise. So to me, that is very compelling. And also the fact that Intertech brings 1,000 test labs in solar, energy storage, and many other components. There's just like, it's another dynamic. So it just really was a great match. I'm very happy that they chose to work with us. And so we're continuing to make additional inroads, but it's a massive organization and we have to continue to network and tell the story. But renewable energy is here to stay. And so we see within their client base of 400,000 and our client base where there's a lot of synergies. So it's exciting. The opportunity to really grow faster and build a bigger platform, to me, that's what excited me and still excites me today.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Good.
Love the. I'm sure there was a lot of culture alignment there as well. So, well, Andy, shifting gears a little bit, we always like to ask our guests if you have a particularly favorite quote that you reflect on.
Absolutely. This one may have been mentioned before, but I'm a huge fan of Richard Branson and the quote that he always says, train people well enough so that they can leave, treat them well enough so they don't want to. We still have this on our team member application that we send to different folks. And I'm very open with our team. Look, all of you are incredibly accomplished professionals who can go and do anything in the sector. Anyone can jump to somewhere else and make a near-term bump in salary or do whatever. But I say, look, part of my job is to create the environment for you to continue to learn and demonstrate your own curiosity, but grow and advance your skills and do things that you can do elsewhere. And so team members really play an important part of drafting their plan for the future. And we truly do try to, we love that Richard Branson quote and really try to build that out as a kind of part of our core DNA. So that's the quote I wanted to share.
Nice. And if you could be any energy technology, what would it be and why? So
I would be the 2008 monocrystalline ingot that was made out of high purity polysilicon at $475 a kilo. So that would have been the most expensive poly and the highest level of purity at that point in time. I remember my early days at Trina where the company had very limited security and just crazy stuff happened. So in 2006, someone bumped into a worker who literally taken a slice of an ingot or a block of an ingot, and they were throwing it over the fence to someone in the middle of the night who then would haul it off and they would sell it in the black market because that was a lot of money back then. Wow. And so Trina immediately put bars on the outside of windows and put more security systems. There were no cameras really at the time. So I would love to be an ingot because I always have a lot of respect for the monocrystalline wafering technology. That's where Trina started the business. The industry then shifted into multicrystalline for a number of years, but now has shifted back to mono. Like multicrystalline is effectively technology that's no longer deployed. But I would particularly, and I should highlight, I would choose the 8-inch form factor because that was the horsepower of the industry for about 13 years. 156 slice wafers were based on that 8-inch ingot. And it was the technology was standardized. Everyone followed the same standard. And I think the industry really grew and expanded as a result. Now, fast forward to today, things have changed. The form factors are very different. But if I had to choose one technology, it would be that 8-inch ingot from that era, because that was my early days in the sector.
That's my favorite answer to date. Very specific. And I absolutely love it.
I was going to say,
I actually did listen to your podcast, so I had that prepared. So that was,
I was going to say, first time we've had a vintage associated with the technology. Love that. Well, Andy, you've been exposed to many people. Excuse me. You've been exposed to many people throughout your time building CEA. You've got a massive network. So I'm really eager to hear your answer on this question. If you could listen to anybody on this podcast, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Well, look, I would, if I was to be very tactical, I'd say I'd have to choose someone who's in the industry today and still very active. But I would say there's plenty of industry visionaries and folks that I would love to hear from the past who moved on. But the one individual who I know would not take that request, but is Dr. Sven Hansen. And he was an early investor in Q cells. Or I'm sorry, it was Q cell, the old Q cells before they were Hanwha Q cells, and also REC. But he was one of the deep pioneers at Good Energies, and he invested in some of the greatest companies in the sector back in the the mid-aughts. And I was very fortunate that he invested in Trina Solar back when I was there. And I learned a tremendous amount from him. So many a time, I will say I had calls with Sven at midnight, 1, 2 in the morning. I had gone through like a full 16-hour day, waking up at 6 a.m., getting to the factory by 7, working till 11, getting the last bus home, and finally getting settled at midnight. And then my calls with Sven would start because he was very active in building Trina. And there were a lot of times where I was translating between he and the chairman, and I had to balance because I wasn't really telling the whole truth because I saw both sides fighting. And I remember once Mr. Gauss said, Andy, I can tell your translation isn't accurate. I want you to tell him exactly what I'm feeling. And so, those are very tricky times. But look, Sven is someone who's invested in dozens of companies and helped build up many in our sector. And he'd be someone that you absolutely should interview. And I'll make the introduction. I don't know if he does podcasts, but would be happy to. My number 2 would probably be Arturo Herrero, because Arturo was in those early days of Trina with me. And he's still very active in the sector, working in Next Tracker now. But Arturo and I were the first 2 foreigners really joining Trina's executive team in those early days in 06 and 07, both pre and post IPO. So those were kind of fun and wild and crazy times.
Have you got, we normally would end here, Andy, but do you have a quick story about the crazy times of operating in China? Like most people you'd speak to, if you ask them, do you want to go and start a business in China? They'd say that's not the natural place. I'm going to go and start.
Well, let me tell you a story from my Trina days, because a lot of my success at CA, I have to go back to early days at Trina and make different parallels. But I remember the first week I was on at Trina, and I was just getting into the job, and Mr. Gauss said, "Look, Andy, you could handle sales, but I need you to solve supply chain issues. So focus on that." But I would always talk to the sales department, and I was speaking to him in Mandarin. And there was a nice female executive who was sitting outside, and I walked in the factory at 8 o'clock. I was like, "Sorry, I didn't realize you were sitting here unattended. How long have you been waiting?" And she's like, "Oh, I've been here 45 minutes." I'm like, "I'm sorry to have you wait. Who are you here to see?" And she said, "James." And so I went and checked James, and he's having coffee and relaxing on the side. And I'm like, "There's a client that's been waiting. What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, there's plenty of clients. It's not a problem." Wow. And I said to him, I was like, "Let's go have this meeting, and I want to sit and join." And then I realized during the meeting, the guy barely spoke any English. And so it was a very broken conversation. So I was doing translation and going through, and I just couldn't believe that we had an international client sitting unattended. No one's paying attention. And there was just massive communication gaps. So finally, at the end of the meeting, she thanked me for helping out, and she asked where the restroom was. So I pointed her in the direction, and she came out suddenly and said, "Is there a Western toilet in the bathroom?" And I said, "I don't know. I've not gone in the women's bathroom yet." So but I did validate there was only just the hole in the ground. That was kind of the standard factory fare back in the day. So I wrote a bilingual communication to the whole leadership team, and I said, "We must install an international toilet in the women's bathroom." And so I walked into the leadership team meeting, and everyone just burst out laughing. And my nickname was the janitor the first week or two. But the next day, a Western toilet did show up, and we did have that. So that was my first real accomplishment at Trina Solar. But those were just the Wild West days of the industry back then. And the industry kind of grew and scaled from there. So it was a lot of fun and a lot of crazy stories around those early times. So that's one I'd have to pick out as a highlight or a low light, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a great way for us to finish up. It's been an absolute pleasure, Andy. You've paved the way for many people to follow, and I know you're only just beginning, and the industry's got a long way to go. Love the culture approach, love your expertise and experience and humble attitude, and I think it's an incredible example for all of us to look up to and follow on from.
Absolutely. Well, look, there's a lot of folks much smarter than myself involved in the sector and taking it to the next level. So it's great to just play a small part in this overall process, but we need to keep growing it and scaling and expanding. So thanks for all the great work that you're doing in your business, and then also getting this news out there for the broader industry to hear.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Andy.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.